we've got my Windows 8 tablet, and we can see it's a rich, intuitive interface which combines seamlessly my personal applications for mail and the all-important games with my corporate applications. But I just said that this is a personal device. Why are there corporate applications on this device? Well, they're not on this device. They're being provided remotely by IT to my tablet using the Inbox Remote Desktop Services capabilities built into Windows Server 2012. Now, I said before we need to look at our reports to assess how strained our infrastructure is. And I'm going to click the Excel Remote app. And what this is launching now is a connection from my device over the wireless network to our data center. It's going to connect me to a remote desktop session host. It's going to log me in, establish a session, and it's going to start Excel. And what you can see is Excel looks and feels to me, the end user, like it's running locally, but it's running securely in the data center. Now I need to check our capacity reports. I'm using Touch for this part of the demo, but you can see that there's something important about this particular document. It's quite sensitive information, and we've used internally dynamic access control to lock down not only who can access this information, but what they can do with this information as well. They can view, print, send, whatever it may be. Certain users may not have access. Other users may be able to open the file, but not be able to do anything else with it. Dynamic access control automatically, in a very granular way, lets us control all of those capabilities. They're very, very powerful. But let's look at our production SQL environment. This is our finance application, and you can see it's in the red. Across CPU, memory, and disk, we're in trouble. So we need to scale up this infrastructure quickly to meet the demands. Now, I'm going to take a three-step approach to scaling out this infrastructure. I'm going to keep my database tier of my application on my premises, in my data center. And I'm going to use the tools within Windows Server 2012 to scale it out, to meet the future demands. For my application tier, the middle tier, I'm going to move that from my data center, and I'm going to run it with a service provider. Somebody who's got more capacity than me and will allow me to scale that application accordingly. And the final tier, the web tier, I'm going to push that into a public cloud Windows Azure service. So we're going to do all three of those things from Windows Server. But I can't do that with Excel. I need to move to an environment where I can access all the management tools I need. So I'm going to go for my remote desktop app, and I'm going to launch a virtual desktop connection. So powered by remote desktop services, again in Windows Server 2012, this time I'm connecting to a true Windows 8 virtual desktop running on Hyper-V. And this virtual desktop is personal to me, and it's got all of my relevant applications and tools that I need to do my job, even when I'm on holiday out of the office. So the first thing we need to do is start to think about how I can scale my SQL infrastructure. And SQL is running on Hyper-V in Windows Server 2012. Now, Hyper-V in Windows Server 2012 truly can virtualize workloads that many people thought couldn't be virtualized before. I'm going to click on this particular virtual machine and look at the settings. And we'll see this particular SQL virtual machine has a total of 4 virtual processors. But I want to change that. I want to increase that so it can handle the increased load that we're going to place on it. So I'm going to change this from 4 to 8. 8 will be more than enough for our needs. But as Edwin said earlier, we don't stop at 8, or 16, or 32. We support 64 virtual processors per virtual machine on all editions of Hyper-V in 2012. So real scalability there for your key resource-intensive workloads. But it's not just CPU. We need to think about memory and network. So I'm going to go to the settings of this running virtual machine, and we'll see that the memory selection here, it's already using a feature built into Windows Server 2012 called dynamic memory, where Hyper-V is managing the virtual machine's memory between a minimum and a maximum, depending on what the workload is doing at this time. I'm going to adjust this memory from 4 GB maximum to 16 GB maximum, enabling this virtual machine, if it needs to scale even higher, taking advantage of that increased hardware performance. I can also adjust the memory priority to ensure that this virtual machine gets what it needs should there be any contention. But I'll also look at the network, because a new feature we've introduced in Windows Server 2012, Hyper-V, is quality of service. So I want to ensure that this particular database workload always gets a minimum amount of network bandwidth made available to it, so that should there be heavy network traffic from other virtual machines, they don't impact this particular virtual machine. So I'm going to choose to type 512
makinelerin internetine maksimum minimum bandwidth verebiliyorsun.
All of the time. We scaled up CPU, network, and memory. But as customers handle higher and larger amounts of data, they told us they need different options around storage going forward. In Windows Server 2012, we've delivered just that. So I want to take a look at my database properties.
Önceki versiyonunda çalışırken hiçbir şey yapamıyorsun. Ethernet'ini sadece değiştirebiliyordun. Şimdi Hyper-V'nin yeni versiyonunda her şeyi oynuyor çalışırken.
CPU'yu arttırabiliyor musun hatırlamıyorum onu işte çalışırken.
It isn't a drive like a drive, it's a file share. It's SMB3 storage, providing simplicity by network file shares, but it's backed by enterprise class performance and resiliency. So SMB3 gives us a new option for not only SQL data, but also Hyper-V virtual machines. So extremely flexible. But we have a problem. We're running out of space. We need to adjust the capacity from our storage perspective. So I'm going to go to the all-new Server Manager. I'm going to take a look at a new feature in Windows Server 2012 known as storage spaces. And storage spaces effectively enable me to aggregate physical disks together and present them through for other virtual disks or services to use. And what you can see here is our particular storage pool is pretty much at capacity. Red is bad, green is good. So we've got some red on there. But we do have some spare physical disks down here that we could use to increase the capacity. And with storage spaces, it's as quick as add physical disk, select the disk. Do I want to make this a hot spare, or do I want to add it to the pool and use it straight away? Yes, we do. And I'll click OK. And you'll see within a few clicks, we've added that capacity to our storage space, and we've now increased what we can make available to, for instance, our SQL share, which we could now extend. So we've looked across CPU, memory, disk, and networking, all within Windows Server. And I'm happy now where our database workload is in terms of performance and capacity. But I want to change direction slightly. I want to focus on our application tier. I mentioned earlier that I want to move our application tier from our data center to a service provider, where they've got increased capacity, they've got more availability than I have internally. They've got a bigger hardware budget. But how can I do that while the workload is running live with no interruption between two data centers? Well, there are two capabilities within Windows Server 2012 that's going to enable me to do that. The first, as Edwin mentioned earlier, shared nothing live migration. The ability to move a running virtual machine from physical location to physical location with all of its disks and configuration files with no shared storage. Just the network connection between the two locations. That's real flexibility. But secondly, when we move that workload to the service provider's data center, We need to think about our networking. How can we keep the same IP address for that virtual machine if it's no longer in our data center? Well, with network virtualization, we can handle that. So I'm going to go over to Virtual Machine Manager. And Virtual Machine Manager is a System Center 2012 component and enables me to manage Hyper-V, Citrix Zen Server, and VMware vSphere infrastructures. But we're focused on Hyper-V today. And I'm also going to bring up an in-house tool that we've built called the IP Portability Tool. And this enables me to see the IP addresses of two key virtual machines within my infrastructure. The database, the SQL backend, but more importantly, the application tier, App 01. And what you can see from App 01, this virtual machine, is it doesn't just have one IP address, it has two. The first IP address is the customer address. This is what the virtual machine sees inside the guest operating system. The provider address, however, is the physical address of that virtual machine. And Hyper-V maintains and manages the relationship between customer address and provider address. So you don't have to worry. And you'll notice that these two provider addresses are exactly the same. And they're the same because both of these VMs are currently on the same physical host. But what we're going to do is we're going to move App 01 from our Contoso data center to our service provider data center. And with a quick drag of the virtual machine manager is going to analyze the target host. It's going to identify whether this is a good candidate for this particular virtual machine anytime soon. And once that's taken place, it's then going to allow me to move that virtual machine live while it's running from my site to the Fabricant data center. So we'll go migrate. And while that's happening, that's going to take a few seconds. You see the process is starting. And what's happening now is the virtual machine is being moved from our data center to the target data center. Now we're just using a regular live migration here of memory and not moving the storage, as this would take too long. But if this was a real life scenario and you were moving from one data center to another, you would be using shared nothing live migration to enable that migration live between data centers with no downtime. So you'll see the process is nearly finished, getting to the end now.
And this is actually incredibly important. Many people have talked about taking your virtual machine and moving it into a hosted provider. We're showing how to do it, but we can do it seamlessly. We can do it without any interruption to the application, and we can do it without having to change the IP address of the system, which is a real problem in the past of moving to a hosted.
Yep. And what you see is the virtual machine has moved over, and you can see that that virtual machine is now running in the service provider's data center. So we've moved it seamlessly while it's online. But the only change is the provider address, because it's now running in a different physical subnet, in a different physical data center. But we've handled that through network virtualization without the need to use VLANs. Extremely powerful capabilities. So we've talked about our database tier. We've talked about our application tier. But now I want to focus on the final tier, our web front end. And to do that, I'm going to migrate across to my other environment to showcase the final parts of the demonstration. There we go. Excellent. So, what we can see here looks very similar to what we had before. But in this case, we're looking at something called System Center 2012 App Controller. An App Controller is our self-service portal for connecting both private on-premise clouds and public clouds. And what you can see on here is I've connected not only my on-premise private clouds, so you can see Contoso development, production and staging, they all run in my data center. But I've also got Fabric app, which is where we just moved that virtual machine to. But finally, I've got a Windows Azure subscription. So I'm able to take advantage of the elasticity and scalability of Windows Azure and push my web tier of my application into Windows Azure. So I'm going to click on Deploy, because we want to deploy a new image into the public cloud. And I'm going to click on Select Deployment Type. Now I want to choose an image. So new recently with Windows Azure is the ability to put virtual machines into Windows Azure, Hyper-V-based virtual machines. I'm going to choose images, and I'm going to choose the best operating system for web-based applications, Windows Server 2012. I'll go OK. And now I need to do some minor configuration. So I'll choose Configure. Now in advance, IT has already established a service that's running in Windows Azure. Our finance web front end is already running in Windows Azure. We're just going to add additional capacity to it. So I'm going to click on this service. I'm going to click OK. And you'll see that there are already 2 virtual machines that are powering this web front end. I'm just going to add a 3rd virtual machine. So I'm going to click Configure. I'm going to give it a name, and I want to choose the size. Do I want it to be extra small, small, medium, large, extra large? I choose. And this will ultimately determine CPUs, memory, disk, and so on. I'm just going to choose medium. And I need a place in Windows Azure where I can store my files and folders. Now I'm going to choose a folder where all of my other finance virtual machines live in Windows Azure, and click OK. I'm going to scroll down a bit further, and I just need to give it the final administrative password for the virtual machine so that I can log in once it's up and running. If I was connected from this virtual machine through to my Active Directory, using some of the identity features Edwin talked about, I could put in domain credentials here as well. But I'm just going to go OK. Click Deploy. And Windows Azure is going to do the rest. So it's going to scale out our web front end of our infrastructure quickly and easily. We've managed that through System Center. And within a few minutes, we can see by looking at the virtual machine view that that process is starting, but that's going to take a few minutes to complete. When I mentioned there are already 2 virtual machines deployed into Windows Azure, already in the finance service. So I want to manage them a bit more effectively. So I'm going to go to Server Manager, I'm going to go to our dashboard, and I'm going to click on Add Other Servers to Manage. And I'm going to type in the name of one of the Windows Azure servers that we've placed up in Windows Azure. I'll click Search, it will find the IP address, it will locate that server, we'll add it, and we'll click OK. And in the All Servers view now, we can see that that particular server is now ready for us to manage it. But not quite. One more step to perform. Because this isn't joined to our domain, we need to add some credentials so that we can manage it effectively from here. So I'll add some domain credentials and click OK. And it will go and gather all of the relevant information, all of the relevant features and capabilities of that particular image, and will allow us to manage it more effectively going forward from our on-premise